The sound you just heard, that sharp, frustrated sob echoing through the marble hallway of Ashford Preparatory Academy, came from 12-year-old Maya Chen, daughter of billionaire tech CEO Victoria Chen. And that was the third time this week she'd locked herself in the bathroom after receiving another failing grade. Maya Chen wasn't stupid. Her IQ test results proved that. The child psychologists her mother hired all agreed. Brilliant mind, extraordinary potential. But none of that mattered when every math test came back with red marks bleeding across the page. Every essay returned with comments like unfocused and lacks coherent structure. Every science project somehow missing the point entirely. The teachers at Ashford Prep, Boston's most elite private school, where tuition cost more than most people's yearly salary, had started using a particular word in their faculty meetings: unteachable. Not because Maya was disruptive or defiant. Quite the opposite. She was quiet, compliant, desperate to please. But something fundamental wasn't connecting. Instructions that other students absorbed effortlessly seemed to slide right past her, leaving confusion in their wake. Victoria Chen, meanwhile, was standing on the edge of a precipice she couldn't name. She had built cloud sync technologies from a dorm room startup into a $3 billion empire. She could negotiate with venture capitalists, manage thousands of employees, predict market trends with uncanny accuracy. But she could not figure out why her daughter, her brilliant, sensitive, trying so hard daughter, was failing everything. The parent-teacher conferences had become exercises in humiliation. The tutors came and went, each one eventually admitting defeat with apologetic phone calls. Victoria had tried everything. Different schools, different teaching methods, incentives, consequences, begging, bribery. Nothing worked. And then there was Marcus Wells, 51 years old, working the evening janitorial shift at Ashford Prep for the past 6 months. He had a kind face weathered by time and hardship, gentle hands that moved carefully when he cleaned, and a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear him. To most people, he was invisible, just another service worker keeping the privileged spaces clean. But Marcus Wells had a secret. 23 years ago, he'd been Professor Marcus Wells, with a PhD in cognitive psychology from Stanford and a specialty in learning disabilities. He'd published groundbreaking research on dyslexia and dyscalculia. He'd had a beautiful wife named Sarah, a daughter named Rebecca, and a future so bright it hurt to look at directly. Then Sarah got sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. The insurance denied experimental treatments. The bills piled up faster than Marcus could count them. He sold everything: the house, the cars, his practice. He spent every dollar trying to save her. And when she died anyway, he was left with nothing but debt and a grief so crushing he couldn't function. Rebecca, 16 at the time, went to live with her aunt in Seattle. Marcus told himself it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. But grief has a way of stealing time. 1 year became 2, became 5, became 7. Rebecca graduated high school, then college. She built a life without him. The few times they spoke, her voice was polite but distant, the voice you'd use with a stranger. Marcus let his licenses lapse, let his credentials gather dust, took whatever work he could find to pay the interest on debts that would follow him to his grave. And he told himself he deserved it. The punishment of invisibility, the sentence of being nobody after being somebody. But here's the thing about expertise. It doesn't disappear just because you stop using it. Marcus couldn't help but notice things. The way certain students held their pencils, the way their eyes tracked across a page, the small telltale signs of brains that processed information differently, beautifully, brilliantly, but not in the way traditional education expected. And on a Tuesday evening in October, while emptying the trash bins in the mathematics wing, Marcus noticed something that made him stop cold. Maya Chen sat alone in an empty classroom, the overhead lights casting harsh shadows across her face. She had a math worksheet in front of her basic algebra, the kind of problems most seventh graders could solve in their sleep. But Maya's paper was barely touched. Instead, she'd filled the margins with intricate drawings. Geometric patterns, spirals, tessellations, each one mathematically perfect, even though she probably didn't realize it. Her face was streaked with tears. Her hands were shaking, and she was whispering to herself a desperate mantra. I'm trying! I'm trying! I'm trying! Why can't I just be normal? Marcus should have kept walking, should have respected the invisible boundary between service workers and students, should have remembered that he wasn't Professor Wells anymore, wasn't anyone who had the right to interfere. Instead, he set down his cleaning cart and knocked gently on the open door. Maya's head snapped up, her eyes going wide with the particular panic of being caught in a vulnerable moment. She scrambled to cover her paper, to wipe her face, to compose herself into the mask of fineness that children of powerful parents learn to wear early. Sorry, she said quickly, her voice small. I know it's late. I'll leave. I just needed somewhere quiet too. I'll go. The patterns on your paper, Marcus said softly, not moving from the doorway. The spirals in the margin. Do you know those that follow the Fibonacci sequence? Maya blinked. What? Fibonacci sequence. A mathematical pattern found in nature. Pine cones, sunflowers, nautilus shells. You drew it perfectly. He gestured to her doodles. Most mathematicians would need a calculator to plot that accurately. You did it from memory or instinct? Maya looked down at her drawings as if seeing them for the first time. I was just drawing. It's not. It doesn't count. Drawing doesn't help me pass my tests. Why not? Because math isn't drawing. Math is numbers and equations and showing your work the right way. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't make my brain do it the way Mrs. Patterson wants. I know the answers sometimes. I can see them. But when I try to write down the steps, it's like trying to explain how I breathe. I just do it, but I can't show the parts. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marcus felt something long dormant stir in his chest. Recognition. The particular ache of seeing a brilliant mind trapped in a system designed for different kinds of thinkers. Can I show you something? He asked. Maya hesitated, glancing toward the door as if calculating whether she'd get in trouble for talking to the janitor. But curiosity won over caution. She nodded. Marcus approached slowly, respectfully, keeping the desk between them. He pulled out a piece of chalk from the tray beneath the blackboard. You said you can see the answers but can't show the steps. What if I told you there's more than one way to show steps? That the way Mrs. Patterson teaches isn't the only way. Just the most common way. There are other ways? Maya's voice held desperate hope. Dozens of ways. Hundreds, really. Math isn't one language. It's many languages describing the same truths. Some people think in numbers. Some think in shapes. Some think in patterns or movements or colors. He drew a simple equation on the board. 3x plus 5 equals 14. Look at this. How would you solve it? Maya stared at the board. I don't know. Mrs. Patterson says, subtract 5 from both sides first, then divide by 3. But when I try to remember the rules, they all jumble together. Forget the rules for a second. Just look at the equation. What does it mean to you? Not what should it mean. What does it actually mean when you look at it? Maya frowned, her gaze unfocusing slightly. Marcus recognized that look, the inward turn of a mind processing in its own unique way. It's like a balance. If you have 3 boxes and add 5 more things, you get 14 things total. So the boxes must have 3 things each. Exactly. Marcus's voice carried more energy than he'd allowed himself to feel in years. You just solved it. Form, Aris. You understood the relationship between the numbers. That's the hard part, the part that matters. But I didn't show my work the right way. You showed your work the way your brain works. And that's not wrong, Maya. It's just different. She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time, Marcus saw beyond the tears and frustration to the sharp intelligence underneath. You're the janitor. How do you know about math teaching? A fair question. Marcus had a choice here. He could deflect, maintain the safe distance of his current identity, or he could offer this struggling child the one thing nobody else was giving her. The truth. I used to be a teacher, he said simply. A long time ago. Before life got complicated. Why did you stop? Why? Because sometimes the things we love cost more than we can afford to keep them. The words came out more raw than he intended. He cleared his throat. But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is you. Tell me what happens when Mrs. Patterson gives you a test. Maya's shoulders hunched inward. The words swim. Not always, but when I'm stressed. And tests make me stressed because I know I'm going to fail. So the stress makes the words swim more. And then I fail. And everyone thinks I'm stupid, even though I'm not stupid. I know I'm not stupid. But maybe I am. Because if I wasn't stupid, I'd be able to just do what everyone else does, and it wouldn't be this hard. The flood of words came faster and faster, years of frustration pouring out. Marcus listened, his trained mind cataloging symptoms, patterns, indicators. Dyscalculia, almost certainly. Probably some processing speed variations. Possibly test anxiety, compounding everything. All utterly treatable. All completely missed by a system more concerned with standardized results than individual understanding. Maya, he said gently, waiting until she met his eyes. You're not stupid. Your brain processes information differently than the way most schools teach. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you someone who needs a different approach. My mom hired 6 tutors. They all gave up. Because they were trying to force your brain to work like theirs. That's like trying to make a cat bark because all the dogs do it. You're not a broken dog, Maya. You're a cat. And cats are brilliant at being cats, but terrible at being dogs. Despite everything, a small smile flickered across Maya's face. That's a weird metaphor. Yeah, well, I'm out of practice. Marcus set down the chalk. Listen, I shouldn't be here this late, and neither should you. But if you want, and only if you want, I could show you some different ways to think about math. Not instead of Mrs. Patterson's way, but in addition to it, like learning a translation guide between your brain's language and the language teachers expect to see. You don't even know me. Marcus thought about Rebecca, about all the years he'd missed, about how he couldn't go back and fix his own failures as a father. But maybe he could stop someone else's child from drowning in a system that couldn't see her. Let's just say I know what it's like to be invisible, he said quietly. And I don't think you should be. Maya clutched her worksheet, her knuckles white. If my mom found out I was getting extra help from the janitor, I don't know what she'd. She's already so disappointed in me. I doubt that's true. You don't know her. She's Victoria Chen. She built a billion-dollar company. She's brilliant and successful, and everyone respects her. And I'm her daughter, who can't even pass 7th grade math. The name registered, Victoria Chen, CloudSync Technologies. Marcus had seen her on magazine covers in the staff break room. Sharp eyes, severe expression, the kind of woman who commanded rooms without effort. The thought of approaching someone like that made his stomach clench. But he thought again of Maya's drawings in the margins, that unconscious mathematical genius expressing itself the only way it knew how. "We don't need to tell anyone yet," Marcus said. "Just you and me. 20 minutes after school, couple times a week. We'll meet somewhere quiet, and I'll show you some tools. If they don't help, no harm done. But Maya, if they do help, then maybe we talk to your mom together. Maybe we show her that you're not failing because you can't learn. You're failing because nobody's teaching you the way you need to be taught." For a long moment, Maya just stared at him. Then, so quietly, he almost didn't hear. "Okay. Okay. Okay. I'll try." She gathered her papers, shoving them into her backpack, with the practiced efficiency of someone used to fleeing uncomfortable situations. At the door, she paused. "Mr. Wells. Marcus Wells. Mr. Wells, thank you for not telling me to try harder. Everyone tells me to try harder, like I'm not already trying as hard as I can. I know you are. Maya, that's the first thing I saw about you." After she left, Marcus stood in the empty classroom for a long time, staring at the equation still on the board. He'd just done something incredibly stupid. Crossed a line he had no business crossing. He could lose this job, and he needed this job. The pay was barely enough to survive on, but it was steady, and it kept him too tired to think about everything he'd lost. But God, it had felt good, using the skills he'd buried. Seeing recognition dawn in a struggling student's eyes, remembering who he used to be. Marcus grabbed his cleaning cart and moved on to the next classroom. But something had shifted. For the first time in 7 years, he felt like more than a ghost. Victoria Chen stared at the email on her screen for the 3rd time, willing the words to change. Subject: Maya Chen. Progress report. Dear Miss Chen, I'm writing to discuss Maya's continued academic struggles. Despite our previous conversations and interventions, she scored 42% on her most recent mathematics exam and 51% on her science quiz. Her English essay was incomplete. Victoria's hand tightened around her phone. 42%. Her daughter, who could dismantle and rebuild a computer at age 8, who had taught herself basic coding by watching online tutorials, who could explain the plot of complex novels she'd read for pleasure, that daughter had scored 42% on a math test. Something was fundamentally wrong, and Victoria couldn't fix it. She, who had solved 1,000 variable problems in her sleep, who had debugged impossible code, who had rescued her company from the brink of collapse 3 separate times. She could not help her own child pass 7th grade. The guilt was crushing. Victoria knew she'd failed Maya in obvious ways. The late nights at the office, the missed recitals and parent events, the distracted half-attention given to homework questions while mentally running through board presentations. She'd told herself it was temporary, that once CloudSync stabilized, she'd be more present. But the company never stabilized. There was always another crisis, another deal, another critical decision only she could make. And now Maya was paying the price. Victoria's assistant buzzed through. "Miss Chen, you have the executive meeting in 5 minutes. Cancel it. But the board? Reschedule. Personal matter." Victoria stood, grabbing her coat. The shocked silence on the other end of the intercom told her how unprecedented this was. Victoria Chen did not cancel board meetings. Victoria Chen did not allow personal matters to interfere with business. But Victoria Chen's daughter was failing, was miserable, was slipping away. And for once, the board could wait. 20 minutes later, Victoria pulled up to Ashford Preparatory Academy in her Tesla. The building was beautiful, in that austere, expensive way, modern glass and steel, perfectly manicured grounds, the kind of place that screamed exclusivity and excellence. She'd chosen it carefully, researched its test scores and college placement rates, paid the astronomical tuition without blinking. And somehow, it was destroying her daughter. Victoria found Mrs. Patterson in her classroom, grading papers at her desk. The math teacher looked up with barely concealed annoyance at the interruption. Miss Chen, Miss Chen, Miss Chen, Miss Chen, I wasn't expecting you until our scheduled conference next week. I got your email. Victoria closed the door behind her. 42%. What's being done about it? Mrs. Patterson sighed, setting down her pen with the weary air of someone who'd had this conversation many times. Miss Chen, we've discussed this. Maya simply doesn't apply herself. She doodles instead of taking notes. She stares out the window during lectures. When I ask her to show her work, she can't explain her reasoning. I've tried extra credit opportunities, tutoring sessions, modified assignments. Nothing works because Maya doesn't engage with the material. She's 12 years old, and she's drowning. There has to be something. Have you considered? Mrs. Patterson interrupted, her tone carrying a sharp edge. That perhaps Ashford Prep isn't the right fit for Maya? We maintain high academic standards. Not every child is suited for them. There are other schools with different approaches, less rigorous environments where struggling students. My daughter is not a tensor, struggling student. Victoria's voice dropped into the dangerous quiet that made executives scramble. My daughter is brilliant. If she's failing here, it's because this school is failing her. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. With all due respect, Miss Chen, parental denial doesn't help anyone. Maya lacks the foundational skills and discipline for our curriculum. Perhaps if she had more structured support at home, more consistent oversight. The implication hung in the air like poison. If you were a better mother. Victoria felt the accusation like a knife between her ribs. Because it was true. Wasn't it? She hadn't been there. She'd chosen the company over her daughter again and again. And now, Maya was drowning, and the teacher was suggesting she be sent away to some less rigorous school, some place for children who couldn't hack it. Thank you for your time, Victoria said, each word carefully controlled. She walked out before Mrs. Patterson could respond, before her composure could crack. In the hallway, Victoria leaned against the wall, eyes closed, fighting for equilibrium. The building was mostly empty at this hour. Just a few staff members lingering, the janitorial crew beginning their evening rounds. The faint smell of cleaning solution and floor polish hung in the air. She should go home? Should pick up Maya from the after-school program and what? Lecture her to try harder? Hire another tutor? Transfer her to another school where she'd fail differently? Victoria started walking, not really seeing where she was going, just moving, because stillness meant facing the reality that she had no idea how to fix this. That's when she heard it. A voice from an empty classroom, male, gentle, patient, and a girl's voice responding, Maya's voice, but different, engaged, questioning, excited. Victoria stopped. Through the small window in the classroom door, she saw her daughter sitting at a desk, papers spread in front of her, and beside her, kneeling to be at eye level, was a maintenance worker in a janitorial uniform. The man was drawing something on the board, shapes and numbers arranged in a circular pattern. Maya was leaning forward, nodding, her eyes bright with concentration. Victoria watched, transfixed, as her daughter picked up a pencil and began working through a problem. Not with the defeated slouch she usually showed, but with actual focus. "So, if I visualize it as a pie," Maya was saying, "and I'm dividing it into these pieces." "Exactly," the man said. "Fractions aren't abstract concepts. They're parts of a whole. Your brain understands that instinctively. You just needed permission to see it your way, instead of trying to force Mrs. Patterson's way." Maya worked through the problem, her pencil moving with growing confidence. When she finished, she looked up, almost afraid to hope. "Is that right?" The man smiled. "Check it yourself. Does your answer make sense when you plug it back into the original question?" Maya looked, verified, and a grin split her face. "It works! I did it! You absolutely did! And look," the man pointed at her paper, "you showed your work. Different organization than Mrs. Patterson uses. But every step is there, clear and logical. Anyone reading this could follow your thinking." Victoria pushed open the door. Both Maya and the man looked up, startled. "Mom!" Maya's expression immediately shuttered, the joy disappearing behind familiar anxiety. We were just, I'm not in trouble. I was working on math." "I can see that." Victoria's gaze moved to the man, taking in the details. Older, 50-ish, kind eyes, worn hands, a name tag that read M. Wells. "And you are?" The man stood, his expression guarded. "Marcus Wells. I'm part of the janitorial staff. I apologize if I overstepped. Maya was working late, struggling with a problem, and He trailed off, clearly realizing he had no good explanation for why the janitor was teaching her daughter math. "Mr. Tellin Bowlers. Wells was helping me understand fractions," Maya said quickly, her voice small. "He showed me a different way to think about them, a way that actually makes sense. Please don't be mad at him." Victoria looked at the board, at the visual representations and spatial arrangements, then at Maya's paper, covered in drawings and annotations that looked nothing like standard mathematical notation, but clearly showed logical progression toward a correct answer. "How long has this been going on?" Victoria asked. Marcus and Maya exchanged glances. "This is our third session," Marcus admitted. 20 minutes after school, twice a week. I know I should have asked permission, but Maya was upset, and I thought, "You thought you'd teach my daughter?" Victoria's voice was unreadable. "You thought you'd step in where 6 private tutors failed? You're the janitor." The words came out harsher than she intended. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe. Or resignation, like he'd expected this exact reaction. "Mom, please," Maya said. "He's actually helping. I understood today's lesson for the first time all semester. I'm not stupid. When Mr. Wells explains things, You're not stupid at all," Victoria interrupted, her voice softening. She looked at her daughter, really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen in months. Hope. "Maya, sweetheart, could you give Mr. Wells and me a moment to talk? Wait in the hallway?" Maya's face fell. "Are you going to fire him?" "I'm just going to talk to him." "Go ahead." Once Maya left, Victoria turned back to Marcus. The man stood perfectly still, prepared for whatever was coming. There was a dignity in his posture that surprised her, a quiet strength that didn't match the stereotype of service workers she'd absorbed without meaning to. "I apologize if my approach was inappropriate," Marcus said before she could speak. "I wasn't trying to undermine her teachers or interfere with your decisions. I just saw a child struggling with something I have expertise in, and I couldn't walk past it." Expertise. Victoria repeated. You're a janitor. I am now. Marcus met her eyes. I used to be Professor Marcus Wells, Ph.D. in cognitive psychology from Stanford. I specialized in learning disabilities, particularly dyscalculia and non-standard mathematical processing. I ran a private practice for 8 years, had a 93% success rate with students who'd been labeled unteachable. The words landed like bombs in the quiet classroom. Victoria found herself re-evaluating everything. The gentle teaching style, the sophisticated understanding of learning differences, the confidence with which he'd approached Maya's difficulties. Why are you cleaning floors instead of teaching? Marcus's jaw tightened. Life happened. My wife got sick. I sold everything to try to save her. When she died, I had nothing left. No practice, no savings, no credentials in good standing. I couldn't afford to renew my licenses, so I take the work available to me. The stark honesty of it hit Victoria hard. Here was someone who had fallen, who had lost everything, and was doing what was necessary to survive. Not so different from the path she'd climbed from poverty to wealth, except in reverse. And you just happen to notice my daughter struggling. I notice a lot of struggling students. I don't usually intervene. Marcus gestured to the board. But Maya, she was failing in a very specific way, a way I've seen before, and I knew that she wasn't incapable. She was just being taught in a language her brain doesn't speak. Mrs. Patterson thinks Maya doesn't apply herself. Mrs. Patterson is wrong. No hesitation, no apology. Maya applies herself more than any student I've worked with. She's just applying herself to the impossible task of making her brain work like someone else's brain. It's exhausting, demoralizing, and it doesn't work. Victoria looked at the papers on Maya's desk. At the correct answers reached through unconventional paths. You think she has dyscalculia. I think she has some processing differences that make traditional mathematical instruction difficult. Whether it meets the clinical threshold for dyscalculia, I can't say without proper assessment, but I can say with certainty that she's capable of high-level mathematical thinking if she's taught in ways that align with how her mind processes information. And you can teach her that way. I have been teaching her that way. 3 sessions, and she's already showing improvement. But, Miss Chen, I have to be honest with you. This isn't something I can fix in 20-minute sessions twice a week. If Maya really has processing differences, and I believe she does, she needs comprehensive support. Assessment, accommodations, probably an IEP or 504 plan. She needs teachers who understand neurodivergent learning patterns. She needs to be taught like the brilliant kid she is, not like a broken version of a neurotypical student. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. For months, she'd been trying to fix Maya, trying to make her fit into the mold of a successful Ashford Prep student. She'd never considered that the mold itself might be wrong. That Maya wasn't broken, the system was. I don't know what to do, Victoria said, and the admission cost her. She wasn't someone who said those words. Ever. I've tried everything I can think of. Nothing works. You've tried everything that involves fixing Maya, Marcus said gently. Have you considered trying things that involve changing everything else? Like what? Like getting her properly assessed by specialists who understand learning differences. Like finding a school or tutoring program that specializes in neurodivergent students. Like giving her permission to be brilliant in her own way, instead of forcing her to be mediocre in someone else's way. Victoria laughed, a bitter sound. You're describing a complete overhaul of her education. Yes, I am. That's complicated, expensive, time-consuming. Yes, Marcus agreed. But so is watching your daughter fail for 6 more years. So is having her graduate, believing she's stupid when she's actually gifted. So is losing her trust because she thinks you're disappointed in who she is. The words hit like physical blows, each one landing on a fear Victoria had been carrying but refusing to name. Maya, thinking she was stupid. Maya giving up. The distance between them growing until it became unbridgeable. "I don't know how to be the parent she needs," Victoria whispered. "I'm good at my job. I built a company from nothing. But this, I don't know how to do this." "No parent knows how to do this," Marcus said. "Parenting isn't a skill you master. It's something you figure out one day at a time, making mistakes and adjusting. But Miss Chen, you have resources most parents don't. You can afford specialists. You can advocate for your daughter. You can make changes that other families can't access." "And what about you?" Victoria asked. Sighed. "CC, you can. In high-pay, supposeds, and common. If I agree to let you continue working with Maya, what do you want?" Marcus blinked, clearly surprised. "Want? You're teaching her effectively. Obviously, you have expertise that's extremely valuable. I'm not stupid enough to reject help just because it came from an unexpected source. So, if I formally hire you as Maya's tutor because that's what you are, not the janitor helping out, what's your rate?" Marcus seemed genuinely at a loss. "I wasn't angling for money. I don't care what you were angling for. I care about results. You got Maya to engage with math. You gave her confidence. You helped her understand in 3 sessions what 6 expensive tutors couldn't accomplish in months. That's worth paying for? Miss Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I can't. I need this janitorial position. The health insurance, the steady hours, I can't afford to lose it. And if your daughter's school found out I was moonlighting as a tutor, using my expired credentials, they'd fire me immediately." Victoria found herself smiling for the first time all day. "Mr. Wells, I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm not asking you to quit your job. I'm offering to pay you additionally for private tutoring sessions with Maya. Evenings, weekends, whatever works with your schedule. Completely separate from your employment here. That's extremely generous. But it's not generous. It's pragmatic. You're helping my daughter. I compensate people who provide value." Victoria pulled out her phone. I'll pay you $200 per hour, 3 sessions per week minimum. Non-negotiable. And if you're serious about helping Maya long-term, I'll also cover the costs of renewing your professional licenses and certifications." Marcus stared at her, something like shock washing over his features. "Why would you do that?" "Because my daughter deserves the best possible support, and because you're clearly qualified to provide it if someone gives you the opportunity." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm good at identifying talent, Mr. Wells, even when it's hiding behind a janitorial uniform. So, what do you say?" For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Victoria watched emotions flicker across his face. Disbelief, hope, fear. Something that looked almost like grief. Finally, he nodded. "I say yes. Thank you. Good. We'll start tomorrow. 5 p.m. at my home office in Beacon Hill. I'll text you the address." Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. "And, Mr. Wells, thank you for seeing my daughter when everyone else, including me, was too busy looking at test scores to see her." As Victoria left the classroom and found Maya waiting nervously in the hallway, she realized something had shifted. Not just in Maya's education, but in her own understanding of what her daughter needed. Maybe success didn't look like perfect grades and easy conformity. Maybe it looked like finding the right guide who could meet Maya where she was and show her a different path forward. And maybe, just maybe, Victoria was finally ready to step off the path she'd been racing down long enough to walk alongside her daughter instead. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened in small, accumulating moments that built like interest compounding in an account Victoria had forgotten she owned. Week 1. Marcus arrived at the Beacon Hill brownstone at exactly 5 p.m., carrying a worn leather satchel that had seen better decades. Maya opened the door before he could knock, her face bright with an eagerness Victoria hadn't seen in months. "I've been practicing the visualization technique you showed me," Maya said, barely letting him through the door. "I did my entire homework assignment by drawing the problems as shapes first, then translating them into numbers. Mrs. Patterson marked 3 wrong, but I checked them myself, and I was actually right. She just didn't understand my notation." Marcus smiled. Setting his satchel on the dining room table, Victoria had cleared for their sessions. "Then, we'll work on translating your language into hers. Not because your way is wrong, but because sometimes we have to speak in dialects others can understand." Victoria watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand. She'd told herself she was just observing, making sure this arrangement was legitimate. But the truth was, she was mesmerized by what she was witnessing. Marcus taught the way water flowed, finding the path of least resistance, adapting to the shape of Maya's understanding rather than forcing her to adapt to rigid methods. He used colored markers to show how different types of numbers behaved. He built 3-dimensional models out of cardboard to demonstrate geometric concepts. He told stories about famous mathematicians who'd struggled in traditional schools but revolutionized their fields. "Ada Lovelace," he said, sketching a portrait on a piece of paper, "is considered the first computer programmer. She lived in the 1800s, and she wrote algorithms for a machine that hadn't even been built yet. She saw patterns nobody else could see. The men of her time thought she was strange, but she was brilliant, just thinking in a language they didn't understand." Maya leaned forward, hanging on every word. "Like me? Exactly like you. Your brain processes spatial relationships and patterns faster than it processes abstract symbols. That's not a deficit, Maya. That's a gift. We just need to give you tools to bridge between your gift and what schools expect to see." By week 3, Maya brought home a math test with an 87%. Not perfect, but passing. Actually passing. Victoria found her daughter in her room that evening, staring at the test paper like it might disappear if she looked away. "Mom," Maya whispered, "I did it. I really did it." Victoria sat beside her on the bed, emotion closing her throat. "You really did, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." "Mr. Wells said I should be proud of myself, not just grateful when other people are proud. He said, my worth isn't determined by grades, but it feels good to finally show what I actually know." Maya looked up, her eyes shining. "Do you think he's right? That I'm not broken?" "Oh, Maya." Victoria pulled her daughter close. "You were never broken. Never. I'm so sorry I let you believe you were. I was so focused on fixing a problem, I forgot to see the incredible kid right in front of me." Maya buried her face in Victoria's shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being together in a way they hadn't been in years. Week 5 brought complications. Victoria's phone rang during a board meeting. Ashford Prep's headmaster, Dr. Whitmore. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway with a sense of foreboding. "Miss Chen, I'm calling regarding Maya's recent academic improvement." Victoria frowned. "I assumed you'd be pleased she's finally passing her classes." "We're always pleased when students succeed," Dr. Whitmore said, his tone careful. "However, Mrs. Patterson has expressed concerns about the methods Maya is using. Her work doesn't follow standard protocols. She's using unconventional notation, visual representations instead of traditional algorithms. Mrs. Patterson worries this approach won't prepare Maya for standardized testing or advanced coursework. Maya is passing tests she was failing 2 months ago, Victoria said, her voice hardening. Her understanding has improved dramatically. What exactly is the problem? The problem, Miss Chen, is that we maintain certain academic standards. If we allow one student to submit work in non-standard formats, it creates precedent issues. Other students might demand similar accommodations, and our curriculum would become accessible? Victoria interrupted. Effective? God forbid. I understand you're protective of your daughter, but no, I don't think you do understand. Victoria's patience snapped. My daughter was drowning in your school. She was failing despite hours of effort. She came home crying because she believed she was stupid, and the only reason she's succeeding now is because someone finally bothered to teach her in a way her brain can process. So, if Mrs. Patterson has concerns about Maya's notation, she can address them with me directly. Or, Maya can withdraw from Ashford Prep entirely and transfer to a school that values actual learning over arbitrary standardization. Silence, on the other end of the line. Then, that won't be necessary. I'll speak with Mrs. Patterson about being more flexible in her assessment criteria. You do that. Victoria ended the call, her hands shaking with anger. That evening, she relayed the conversation to Marcus during Maya's session. He listened without surprise, his expression knowing. Unfortunately, this is common, he said. Schools say they want students to succeed, but they want students to succeed in very specific, measurable, standardized ways. Anything outside that narrow definition gets labeled as problematic, even when it works. So what do we do? Victoria asked. Maya's thriving with your approach? I'm not going back to watching her fail, just to satisfy Mrs. Patterson's rigid expectations. We document everything, Marcus said firmly. Every assignment, every test, every example of Maya demonstrating understanding through her methods. We build a portfolio showing not just that she's learning, but that her way of learning produces results. And if Ashford Prep won't accommodate that, then yes, you find a school that will. Victoria nodded slowly. Would you help with that? Finding the right school if it comes to that? Of course. But Miss Chen, there's something else you should consider. Marcus hesitated, then continued. Maya would benefit from a formal neuropsychological evaluation. Not because anything's wrong with her, but because official documentation of learning differences would legally require schools to provide accommodations. It would protect her from exactly the kind of resistance Dr. Whitmore just showed. You mean an IEP? Like special education? An IEP, or a 504 plan. Yes, I know there's stigma attached to those labels. But do it, Victoria said immediately. Whatever she needs. I don't care about stigma. I care about Maya having every possible advantage. Marcus looked surprised, then relieved. I'll send you a list of specialists who understand neurodivergent learning profiles. They're expensive, but money isn't the issue. Maya's well-being is. Victoria met his eyes. Thank you, Marcus, for seeing her, for fighting for her. She's easy to fight for, Marcus said softly. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Week 8. Maya came home with news that made Victoria's blood boil. Mrs. Patterson says, I have to start showing my work her way again. Maya said, her voice small and scared. She says my methods are confusing the other students and I need to set a better example. She says, if I can't follow the curriculum, maybe I need to be in a different math class. The remedial one. Victoria found Marcus already at the house. He'd started arriving early, helping Maya with homework before their formal sessions. He looked as angry as Victoria felt. This is retaliation, he said bluntly. Maya's success makes Mrs. Patterson's previous assessment look incompetent, so she's trying to force Maya back into a framework where she'll fail, which validates Mrs. Patterson's original judgment. Can she do that? Just unilaterally change Maya's placement? She can recommend it. The school would need your approval for any schedule changes. Marcus pulled out his phone. But Miss Chen, I think it's time we brought in reinforcements. I have a colleague, former colleague, Dr. Sarah Kim. She's one of the best educational advocates in Boston. She eats situations like this for breakfast. 2 days later, Dr. Kim sat in Victoria's living room. A small, fierce woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. She listened to Maya's story, reviewed samples of her work, and nodded decisively. This is textbook discrimination against a neurodivergent learner, Dr. Kim said. I'll draft a letter to Ashford Prep, requesting immediate accommodations under federal disability law. They'll either comply or face a very expensive lawsuit they will lose. I don't want Maya to become a target, Victoria said. If we push too hard. If you don't push, Maya stays in an environment actively harming her. Dr. Kim interrupted. Miss Chen, I've been doing this for 20 years. Schools rely on parents being afraid of rocking the boat. But your daughter deserves better than fear-based decision-making. Marcus had been quiet, but now he spoke. There's another option. A school called Harbor Learning Center in Cambridge. It specializes in gifted students with learning differences. Small class sizes, individualized instruction, teachers trained in neurodivergent education. Maya would thrive there. Why didn't you mention this before? Victoria asked. Because it's extremely selective and has a 2-year waiting list. Marcus pulled out a brochure. But I called in a favor with the director, someone I worked with years ago. She agreed to interview Maya as a mid-year transfer candidate if you're interested. Victoria looked at the brochure, then at Maya. What do you think, sweetheart? Do you want to stay at Ashford and fight? Or try somewhere new? Maya bit her lip. I don't want to be the weird kid everyone accommodates. I want to be somewhere people learn like I do. Where I'm not different, just me. Then we visit Harbor next week, Victoria decided. The Harbor Learning Center was nothing like Ashford Prep. Where Ashford was all glass and marble and intimidating prestige, Harbor was warm, brick, and colorful murals, and the sound of genuine laughter echoing through halls. Students worked in clusters, sprawled on floor cushions, building models, and arguing enthusiastically about projects. The director, Miss Patricia Lee, welcomed them into her office, a space crammed with books, student artwork, and a 3-dimensional periodic table made entirely of Lego. Marcus speaks very highly of Maya, Miss Lee said, smiling at the girl. He says you're a spatial thinker with extraordinary pattern recognition abilities. Maya glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I guess so. I just see things in shapes and colors more than numbers. So do about 40% of our students, Miss Lee said. That's not unusual here. It's celebrated. We teach multiple mathematical languages because we know there's no single right way to think. Some students are symbolic thinkers. Some are visual thinkers. Some are kinesthetic thinkers. All brilliant. Just different processing styles. She pulled out a student portfolio. This is from one of our 8th graders. She does calculus using color-coded arrays. Completely non-traditional notation but mathematically sound. She's headed to MIT next year. Maya's eyes went wide. She can do math her own way and still go to college? She can do math her own way and excel beyond what traditional methods ever allowed her to achieve. Miss Lee looked at Victoria. Miss Chen, I'm going to be frank. Maya is exactly the kind of student Harbor was designed for. We have an unexpected opening due to a family relocation. If you want it, the spot is hers, starting next semester. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Yes, absolutely yes. That night, after Marcus had gone home and Maya was asleep, Victoria sat in her home office, staring at enrollment paperwork for Harbor Learning Center. Her signature on these documents meant admitting that Ashford Prep of the school she'd carefully selected, the school that was supposed to guarantee Maya's success, had failed her daughter completely. It meant admitting that she'd failed too, by not seeing Maya's struggles for what they were, but it also meant giving Maya a future where she could be brilliant on her own terms. Victoria signed the papers. When she told Marcus the next evening, he smiled a real smile that transformed his entire face. You're giving her an incredible gift. We're giving her an incredible gift, Victoria corrected. This wouldn't have happened without you. Marcus, I've been thinking. You're working 2 jobs, barely surviving financially, using expertise that could change hundreds of kids' lives. That's absurd, Miss Chen. Victoria. Please, we've been doing this for 3 months. You've literally changed my daughter's life. First names. Marcus ducked his head, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. Victoria? Then, but I'm not sure where you're going with this. I want to fund you, Victoria said. Not as Maya's tutor. You'll continue that regardless. But I want to cover the costs of renewing all your credentials, your licenses, your certifications. I want to invest in you starting a private practice again, or joining Harbor's staff, if that interests you, or launching a nonprofit that trains teachers in neurodivergent education. Whatever you want to build, I'll back it. Marcus stared at her. That's an extraordinary offer. But why? What do you get out of it? I get to know that other families won't go through what we did. That other kids, like Maya, won't spend years believing they're stupid because nobody bothered to teach them right. Victoria leaned forward. Marcus, you have a gift. You see struggling students, and you know immediately how to reach them. That's rare. That's valuable. And it's being wasted because you can't afford to use it. So let me remove that barrier. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll let me invest in someone who invested in my daughter when he had no reason to, when it risked his job and his livelihood. Victoria's voice softened. You gave Maya back her confidence. Let me give you back your calling. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes suspiciously bright. Finally, he nodded. Yes, thank you. I'll make it count. I know you will. 3 weeks later, Maya started at Harbor Learning Center. Victoria took the morning off, another unprecedented move to drive her daughter to her first day. In the car, Maya was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, she said, Mom? What if they're wrong? What if I'm not actually smart the way Mr. Wells thinks? What if I fail here too? Victoria pulled over, parking on a quiet street. She turned to face her daughter. Maya, you are brilliant. Not because test scores say so, but because I see how your mind works. I see how you solve problems nobody else notices. I see how you think in patterns and connections. That's intelligence, sweetheart. Real intelligence. But what if? No. What ifs? We're done with what ifs. You're going to walk into that school, and you're going to be exactly who you are. And if anyone has a problem with that, they're wrong. Not you. Never you. Again. Maya's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much. That afternoon, Victoria waited anxiously for the end of school, her phone in hand, ready to rush over if Maya needed her. Instead, Maya came home breathless and glowing. Mom, they have a math class that uses visual programming, and an art teacher who integrates geometry into painting. And nobody looked at me weird when I drew my algebra homework as diagrams. I'm not the strange one there. I'm normal. Victoria hugged her daughter tight, laughing and crying at the same time. You were always normal, Maya. Always. That evening, Marcus arrived for their regular session to find Maya already working on homework, actually engaged, actually enjoying it. I don't think she needs me as much anymore, Marcus said quietly to Victoria. She's found her place. She'll always need you, Victoria countered, just maybe differently now. But Marcus, I do have a proposition. Harbor's director called. They want to offer you a consulting position, training their teachers in your assessment methods. It pays well, and it's part-time, so you could build your private practice alongside it. Marcus looked stunned. You set that up. I mentioned your name. Miss Lee did the rest. She remembers your research, respects your work. This is your merit, Marcus, not my influence. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by helping more kids like Maya. Thank me by never settling for invisibility again. Victoria smiled. You're too talented to be emptying trash cans. The world needs Professor Wells back. Marcus's eyes glistened. For 7 years, I thought I'd lost myself completely. Lost everything that mattered. But meeting Maya, helping her, remembering who I used to be, his voice cracked. You gave me back more than a career. You gave me back my purpose. You gave us back our family, Victoria said softly. We're even. They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the doorway as Maya worked on homework with focused joy. No longer fighting her own brain, but finally working with it. 6 months after Maya started at Harbor Learning Center, Victoria's life looked fundamentally different. She'd restructured her entire schedule around dinner at home, every night. She'd delegated responsibilities she'd once guarded jealously. She'd discovered that her company didn't collapse when she worked 50 hours a week instead of 80. And she'd fallen into an easy friendship with Marcus Wells that neither of them had quite named, but both relied on. He still tutored Maya twice a week, though now it was less remedial work and more advanced enrichment. Maya had tested into Harbor's accelerated mathematics track and was thriving. But Marcus also stayed for dinner, more often than not, debating educational philosophy with Victoria, while Maya did homework at the table, interjecting comments that made them both laugh. It was comfortable, safe, good, until Victoria's mother arrived. Catherine Chen swept into the brownstone on a Friday evening, unannounced. As was her way, 72 years old, impeccably dressed, carrying the authority of someone who'd raised 3 children alone after immigrating with nothing. She said, her accent still thick, despite 5 decades in America. We need to talk about your daughter. Victoria tensed immediately. Her mother had opinions about everything, delivered with love but inflexibility. Maya is doing wonderfully, Mom. Straight A's at her new school. Harbor Learning Center. Catherine pronounced it like a diagnosis. The school for children with problems. The school for gifted children with learning differences, Victoria corrected, fighting to keep her voice even. Maya doesn't have problems. She has a different learning style. Different learning style. Catherine set down her purse with a decisive thunk. In my day, we called it lazy. We called it unfocused. And we fixed it with discipline and hard work. Mom, I saw the bill from that neuropsychologist. $15,000 to tell you what I could have told you for free. Maya needs structure. She needs consequences. She needs to stop making excuses and learn to work hard like everyone else. The words ignited something combustible in Victoria's chest. All the guilt she'd carried, all the doubt, all the fear that maybe she was coddling Maya, that maybe the struggles really were just lack of effort. It all crystallized into fury. Maya works harder than any child I've ever seen, Victoria said, her voice low and dangerous. She works twice as hard as her classmates to achieve the same results because her brain processes information differently. That's not laziness. That's a disability. And she deserves support, not judgment. Support, Catherine scoffed. I supported you by working 3 jobs, so you could go to good schools. I supported you by not accepting excuses when things got difficult. And look what you became. But Maya? You let her quit a prestigious school. You coddle her with special programs. You hire expensive tutors to tell you she's special instead of admitting she's just not applying herself. That's enough! Victoria's hands shook. You don't get to come into my home and tell me I'm failing my daughter. You don't get to dismiss her struggles because you don't understand neurodivergence, and you certainly don't get to suggest that struggling means someone isn't working hard enough. I'm saying these things because I love you both, Catherine said, her voice gentler but no less firm. I'm saying sometimes love means pushing, not cushioning. Sometimes love means expectations, not accommodations. You're making Maya weak, Victoria. You're teaching her the world will bend to her needs. But it won't. Life is hard, and children need to be prepared for that hardness. The front door opened. Marcus walked in, as he'd started doing. Victoria had given him a key 3 months ago for tutoring sessions. He froze, taking in the tense scene. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I didn't realize you had company. I can come back. This is Marcus Wells, Victoria said, not taking her eyes off her mother. Maya's tutor. Marcus. My mother, Catherine Chen. Catherine's gaze swept over Marcus. The worn jacket. The slightly rumpled appearance of someone who worked hard for every dollar. Her expression shifted into something sharper. Ah, the famous tutor. Victoria pays a fortune. Mom, Victoria warned. But Catherine continued, addressing Marcus directly. Tell me, Mr. Wells, do you really believe my granddaughter has a disability? Or is this convenient diagnosis just job security for you? Marcus's expression remained remarkably calm, though Victoria saw his jaw tighten. Mrs. Chen, I believe Maya has extraordinary gifts that require teaching approaches different from traditional methods. Whether you call that a disability or a learning difference is semantics. What matters is that she's now excelling instead of failing. Excelling at an easier school with lower standards? Catherine countered. Victoria tells me Harbor doesn't give traditional grades. How convenient. Everyone succeeds when you remove the measurements of success. Harbor absolutely has rigorous standards, Marcus said, his voice even but firm. They simply measure mastery of concepts rather than performance on arbitrary timed tests. Maya is learning calculus at 12 years old. She's coding in 3 languages. She's writing research papers that would challenge high school seniors. That's not lower standards, Mrs. Chen. That's education tailored to how her brilliant mind actually works. And you're the expert on brilliant minds? Catherine's tone dripped with skepticism. What are your credentials exactly? Where did you train? Victoria stepped forward. Mom, Marcus has a PhD from Stanford. He's a published researcher in cognitive psychology. He's more qualified than anyone I've ever hired for Maya. Catherine's expression flickered surprise, then calculation. PhD from Stanford. And now, you tutor one child. What happened? Lose your license? Ethical violations? Mom! Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. That's completely inappropriate. But Marcus raised a hand gently. It's fine, Victoria. Mrs. Chen, you're right to question. You want to protect your granddaughter? I respect that. He met Catherine's eyes directly. I left professional practice 7 years ago when my wife died and medical debt destroyed me financially. I lost everything trying to save her, including my career. So, yes, I fell far. But that doesn't make me less qualified to help Maya. If anything, it makes me better at recognizing when someone is drowning in a system that doesn't see them, because I know what drowning feels like. The room went silent. Catherine's expression shifted, something softer flickering beneath her armor. But she rallied. A sad story, Mr. Wells. But Maya doesn't need sympathy. She needs discipline. She needs to learn that life isn't fair, and special accommodations won't follow her forever. You're right, Marcus said quietly. Life isn't fair. Maya will face discrimination and skepticism for being neurodivergent. People will judge her for needing accommodations. They'll tell her she's making excuses, that she's not trying hard enough. That's guaranteed. He paused. But what's not guaranteed is having a family that understands, that fights for her, that teaches her she's not broken for needing support. Mrs. Chen, Maya, will face enough hardship from the world. She deserves softness from the people who love her. Catherine looked away, jaw tight. For a moment, Victoria thought, maybe the words had landed. Then her mother spoke, voice brittle. Victoria, you're making a mistake. You're weakening your daughter. And when she fails in the real world, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. She grabbed her purse. I hope you realize that before it's too late. She walked out, closing the door with devastating finality. Victoria stood frozen, chest heaving, feeling like she'd just survived a battle. Marcus touched her shoulder gently. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have gotten engaged. I should have left when I saw you were in the middle of... Don't apologize. Victoria turned to him, eyes burning. Thank you for defending Maya, for understanding what she needs. Her voice broke. My mother survived so much, immigrated alone with 3 children, built a life from nothing. She's the strongest person I know, but she doesn't understand this. She thinks accommodating differences is a weakness, and maybe for her generation, maybe for her circumstances, that was true. But it's not true for Maya. It can't be. You're right. It's not. Marcus's hand was still on her shoulder, warm and steady. Victoria, you're giving Maya something your mother couldn't give you. Permission to be different. Permission to struggle without shame. That's not a weakness. That's extraordinary love. Victoria leaned into him without thinking, her forehead resting against his shoulder. He hesitated, then wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that, quiet, until Maya's voice broke the moment. Grandma left? Maya stood on the stairs, her face pale. I heard yelling. Was she mad about me? Victoria pulled back from Marcus, wiping her eyes quickly. Sweetheart, Grandma is. She's from a different time. She doesn't understand learning differences. That's not your fault. She thinks I'm lazy. Maya's voice was small. She thinks I'm making excuses. She's wrong, Victoria said fiercely, crossing to her daughter. Maya, you are the hardest working person I know. You fight every single day against a world that wasn't built for how your brain works. That's not laziness. That's courage. But what if she's right? Maya whispered. What if I'm just using my learning difference as an excuse? What if I could do better if I just tried harder? Marcus knelt in front of Maya, his expression serious. Maya, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your brain is not less than neurotypical brains. It's different. It processes information through visual and spatial pathways instead of linear symbolic pathways. That's not a choice. That's neurology. Trying harder doesn't change your neurology any more than trying harder would let you breathe underwater. Do you understand? Maya nodded slowly. Good. Now, are there things you need to work on? Sure. We all do. But the work isn't making your brain function differently. The work is learning strategies to translate between your brain's language and the language the world expects. And Maya, you're doing that brilliantly. Don't let anyone, even people who love you, make you doubt that. Maya hugged him suddenly, fiercely. Marcus looked startled, then hugged her back, his eyes meeting Victoria's over her daughter's head. That night, after Maya went to bed, Victoria and Marcus sat in the living room with tea. Neither of them was drinking. My mother isn't a bad person, Victoria said quietly. She just survived so much trauma that she can't distinguish between resilience and refusing help. For her, accepting you're different meant being vulnerable in a country that didn't want you, so she never let herself be vulnerable. She powered through everything, and it worked for her. But Maya isn't her. Maya doesn't have to carry that weight. You carry it, though, Marcus observed. The weight of your mother's expectations, the need to be perfect, to never fail, to solve everything through sheer force of will. Victoria laughed bitterly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who carries similar weight. Marcus smiled sadly. I spent 7 years punishing myself for failing my wife, for not being able to save her, for losing everything. I told myself I deserved invisibility because I'd failed when it mattered most. It took meeting Maya, helping her, remembering I had value beyond my worst moment. It took that to realize I was carrying weight that wasn't mine to carry. How did you let it go? I'm still learning. But helping Maya helped, remembering that failure isn't permanent, that falling doesn't mean you're fallen forever. He looked at her, asked him, Victoria, you're an extraordinary mother. You changed your entire life for Maya. You fought systems, moved her schools, confronted your own mother. That's not a weakness. That's a transformation. I just wish everyone saw it that way. The people who matter do. Marcus set down his tea. Maya sees it. I see it. And eventually, even your mother might see it. But even if she doesn't, you're doing the right thing. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes again. When did you become my therapist too? I think we're both each other's therapists at this point. Marcus smiled. Mutual healing. It's cheaper than traditional therapy. Victoria laughed, the tension finally breaking. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. For Maya. For tonight. For seeing us. Thank you for letting me be seen again, Marcus said softly. Think, and the 10 units. A content uses 7. A content uses 10. For remembering, I'm more than the worst thing that happened to me. 3 months later, Maya presented her science fair project at Harbor's annual showcase. The project, a visual programming interface that taught mathematical concepts through pattern games, was sophisticated, creative, and entirely Maya's design. Victoria stood in the back of the gymnasium watching her daughter explain her work to judges, her confidence radiant. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed, grinning like a proud parent. She's remarkable, he murmured. She really is, Victoria agreed. Then, quietly, you helped make that possible. We both did. You gave her space to bloom. I just showed her where the light was. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. I'm watching from the doorway. She looks happy. Maybe I was wrong. Victoria felt her breath catch. It wasn't an apology. Not quite. But from Catherine Chen, it was close. She showed Marcus the text. He smiled. Progress. Yeah, progress. Maya finished her presentation. The judges nodded, impressed. She bounded over to Victoria and Marcus, her face glowing. I think they liked it. Did you see? They asked me so many questions, and I knew all the answers. Victoria pulled her into a hug. You were perfect, sweetheart. So perfect. Mr. Wells, did you see the visualization subroutine? I added it last night like you suggested, and it made everything clearer. I saw. It was brilliant. You're brilliant, Maya. And watching her daughter, confident, thriving, no longer drowning but flying, Victoria finally let herself believe what Marcus had been telling her for months. They'd done it. They'd saved her. Together. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't against external enemies, but against the voices that tell us different means are broken. Sometimes salvation comes not from changing who we are, but from finding people who see us clearly and love us anyway. Maya won second place in the science fair, but the real victory had happened months earlier. In a classroom where a struggling girl met a fallen teacher, and they reminded each other that being seen is the first step toward being saved. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.